Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the side of history that nobody puts in action movies. The genuinely, bone-crushingly boring parts that actually make up like 95% of what people in the past experienced. You're about to spend the next few hours walking through a world where nothing happens, where the most exciting thing that occurs in a week might be a slightly different color of mold on the bread. Right now, picture yourself in that moment just before sleep takes hold, when your mind starts drifting and time feels like it's moving through honey. That's the sweet spot where this story lives. Here's the thing nobody tells you about history, the dramatic stuff, the battles and betrayals and coronations. They're basically the blips on the radar. In between those moments are years, decades sometimes, of just existing, waiting, doing the same thing over and over. And that's not a bug in history, it's the actual feature. That's what people's lives were actually like. You probably think you know what the past was, shaped by what you've seen in movies or read in adventure novels, but I can promise you that the medieval person you're about to become in your mind would have given anything for the kind of entertainment you've got right now. They would trade their entire life for 5 minutes of whatever screen you're looking at, because their reality was so fundamentally, relentlessly boring that boredom itself became invisible, just the baseline of existence. So here's your reality check. Most people in history didn't achieve anything. They didn't discover continents or write symphonies or lead revolutions. They woke up, did their job, went to sleep, and did it all again tomorrow. And not in a pleasant, meditative way, in a grinding, exhausting, tooth-achingly repetitive way. You probably won't survive this journey unchanged, because once you realize how monotonous the past actually was, modern life's complaints start to sound almost charming. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious where you're drifting off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a field at dawn, and the sky is that murky grey blue that makes you wonder if it's going to rain or if this is just it for the day. Your feet are already cold, and the day hasn't technically started yet. This is where our story begins, not with some dramatic moment, but with this, the realization that historical boredom wasn't just an occasional inconvenience. It was the structure of life itself. The past operated at a different speed than we're used to, a rhythm so slow and repetitive that excitement became something people had to manufacture out of basically nothing. A priest might spend weeks looking forward to a feast day. A merchant might anticipate a single transaction for months. A noble might recount the same hunting story for years, because there literally wasn't anything else to talk about. And here's where it gets interesting, in a quiet sort of way that monotony shaped everything. How people thought, what they valued, why they acted the way they did. It all comes back to a world so profoundly, fundamentally boring that we can barely even imagine it. You've got infinite entertainment available to you at any moment, and people back then had to sit with themselves and their repetitive surroundings for entire lifetimes. The human brain isn't built for that kind of sensory deprivation, which is probably why people believed in so many wild supernatural things. When there's nothing to do and nowhere to go, your imagination becomes your only escape route, and it gets weird. So settle in. We're going to walk through the parts of history that textbooks mention in passing. If they mention them at all, we're going to feel what it was actually like to be bored in a way that modern people can barely fathom. And somehow, that's going to be the most relaxing journey you've taken in a while. Because there's something profoundly soothing about a world where nothing much happened, where the stakes were low and the pace was glacial, and where you could genuinely expect that tomorrow would be exactly like today. You wake up before the sun does, not because you want to, but because your body has learned that staying in bed once the light starts creeping around the edges of the shutters is a waste of precious daylight. It's cold. Everything is always cold in ways that modern heating has made almost incomprehensible. You pull yourself up, and your back makes a sound like wood settling. You're not old, but you're not young anymore either, and honestly, you've stopped keeping track of which is which. There's no breakfast ritual here, no coffee, no toast, no moment of quiet contemplation before the day starts. There's maybe some cold bread from yesterday, if you're lucky, and water from the well. You eat it standing up while looking at the list of things you have to do, except there is no list, because you can't read, and even if you could, the tasks are so ingrained in your muscle memory that thinking about them would be redundant. You do what you did yesterday. You'll do it again tomorrow. You've been doing it for years. By the time the sun is properly up, you're already working. The specifics depend on what you do. If you're a peasant working someone else's land, you're in the fields. If you're a craftsperson, you're in your workshop. If you're a merchant, you're checking your inventory. If you're nobility, you're still dealing with land and accounts and obligations, just in a nicer room. The location changes, but the rhythm doesn't. It's work that doesn't really progress anywhere. You're not building toward a goal or creating something that will eventually be finished. You're maintaining a state of things. You're keeping the wheel turning so that next year it can turn again in exactly the same way. Here's a historical fact that rarely makes it into the exciting stories. The average medieval peasant worked roughly 12 to 14 hours a day during the growing season, which was basically 5 months of relentless labor. But here's the quirky part that historians barely mention. Sometimes, literally nothing would happen. Entire days could pass where the work was so rote, so disconnected from any sense of progress or accomplishment, that the person doing it might struggle to remember what they'd actually done when the day ended. You'd move from one repetitive task to another. Pull weeds, move to the next row. Pull more weeds, move again. And suddenly the sun was gone and you were exhausted, but nothing had fundamentally changed. The field still had weeds. Tomorrow you'd be back pulling the same ones. The real bore, crushing aspect of this life is that there was no escape velocity. This wasn't a job you were working toward getting out of. This wasn't paying your dues for some future opportunity. This was your life from now until you died. You knew it. Everyone knew it. And knowing it made the monotony heavier because it wasn't temporary. It was the permanent condition of your existence. By midday, you might grab something to eat, more bread, maybe some thin soup if there's a fire going, possibly some cheese if your family raises animals. The food is functional. It exists to keep you working, not to be enjoyed. Taste is secondary to calorie content. Variety is something that happens maybe a few times a year when different crops come in, but mostly you eat the same thing over and over until you stop noticing what it tastes like. Your body just processes it as fuel. The afternoon stretches out in exactly the same way the morning did. More work. More of whatever task defines your day. If you're outdoors, you notice the weather, but not in a contemplative way, in a practical one. Is it going to rain and ruin what you're doing? Is it cold enough that your hands are getting numb? These are the only weather considerations that matter. You're not thinking about the beauty of clouds or the satisfaction of a good day's warmth. You're thinking about whether conditions are going to make your job harder. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced boredom in the way we do now, whether they even had the cognitive framework to feel restless about monotony, or whether their brains were just wired differently by a lifetime of unchanging routine. But one thing's certain, they noticed when things were different, and they mentioned it. The rare times a feast happened, or a traveller came through town, or someone unusual showed up. Those events got talked about for months. people would bring them up years later, because normal life was so aggressively, relentlessly the same that any variation became a major event in the local memory. As the sun starts to set, there's maybe an hour of lighter work. Things wind down. If you've got a family, you might spend time with them, though even that's fairly quiet. Most people are too tired to talk much. You eat whatever's available for evening food, which is probably bread again, maybe some onions. Your hands are sore, your back aches, and your eyes are tired from squinting in the fading light all day. When darkness falls, and it falls completely, because the idea of artificial light for the average person is basically a luxury they can't afford. You go to sleep. Maybe you talk for a few minutes. Maybe there's some interaction with your family or whoever shares your space. But mostly, you just lie down on whatever surface you sleep on and close your eyes. Tomorrow you'll wake up and do this exact thing again. This is the true structure of history, not the exciting parts. You slip out of the village at dusk, not because it's dramatic or cinematic, but because that's when the shadows make it easier to avoid the nosy widow who asks too many questions about where everyone's going. Your assassin cloak is really just your regular wool tunic with a hood pulled low, nothing sleek or black market special, because dye costs money and stealth is more about blending into the wood smoke haze than looking like a movie villain. You've got a contract, whispered to you in the back of the Aller House 2 nights ago, some merchant's rival needs dealing with before the next market day. Sounds simple, right? Except now you're trudging 3 miles through mud that sucks at your boots like it's got a personal grudge, and your big plan is waiting for the target to step outside for the privy. Here's the unglamorous truth that romantic histories skip. Most medieval assassins weren't shadowy ninjas or poison experts. They were locals, with grudges, hired for a pouch of silver that barely covered the travel. A mainstream fact to ground this: guild records from 14th century Italy show that professional hitmen, or bravi, spent more time as bodyguards or debt collectors than actually killing anyone. Their success rate, laughably low, hovering around 30% on good days, because targets had guards, locked doors, and the basic human instinct to not wander off alone after dark. You finally reach the town outskirts, huddling in a ditch that smells like it's been marinating in regret for centuries. Hours pass. Your knees ache, bugs crawl up your sleeves, and the only excitement is when a dog barks at absolutely nothing. Joke number 1: if boredom was a weapon, you'd have assassinated the entire forest by now. The quirky tidbit that makes this even better: some assassins used patented methods that sound clever until you think about the logistics, like the fringe accounts of 12th century Damascus, where killers hid in bread ovens, emerging covered in flour to look like ghosts. Except ovens are hot, flour itches like crazy, and ghosts don't sneeze from pepper planted as a distraction. You're not doing that tonight. Your plan is simpler. Slip into the merchant's stable while he's at supper, tamper with his horse's saddle girth so it snaps mid-ride tomorrow, sabotage over stabbing because blood makes noise and noise brings pitchforks. You creep toward the stable, heart pounding not from thrill, but from the very real chance of getting caught by a stable boy who'll yell for the watch. Historians still argue whether most assassinations were even planned hits or just convenient accidents pinned on professionals later. Like that time in 1271 when Prince Edward of England was supposedly stabbed in his tent, but evidence suggests it was more a clumsy poisoning gone wrong than surgical precision. Either way, the aftermath was always the same: you bolt, but not in some heroic sprint. You're dodging manure piles, climbing fences that snag your best hose, and praying the moon stays behind clouds. Back home by midnight, you count your coins, half up front, half on confirmation. But confirmation takes weeks because news travels by horse and rumor. Joke number 2: your payout buys half a pig, which is great until you realize you're now ethically committed to eating your own crime scene. The day job grind hits harder than any blade. Mornings you're back to chopping wood or mending nets. Whatever covers the bills when contracts dry up, clients haggle like it's a fish market. Make it look natural and cheaper. You keep ledgers on scraps of parchment, because forgetting who owes you what leads to awkward village reunions. Afternoons might mean scouting, loitering in markets, eavesdropping on gossip that turns out to be 90% about whose cow kicked whose fence. The tension builds not from moral quandaries but logistics. Does the target have a dog, kids who wander, a wife who sleeps with a knife under the pillow? You factor in weather, feast days, even church schedules, because Sunday Mass means half the town is armed with nothing but piety and bad hymns. Evenings drag into planning sessions that feel like eternal meetings. You sketch rough maps on the dirt floor, tavern here, alley there, while nursing a tankard that costs more than your last fee. Joke number 3. If assassins unionized, their strike would be over on reasonable waiting times and hazard pay for mosquitoes. The quirky fringe detail amps up the tedium. Some Italian contracts from the 1300s included clauses for travel reimbursement and injury compensation, turning murder into a bureaucratic nightmare. You'd quill out demands, plus fodder for my donkey, while the client sighs about budgets. Failures pile up too, targets move, guards double, or you get the shakes from last night's sour all. One botched job means Elias is hiding in haylofts, eating cold roots until the heat dies down. By week's end, you're not a feared spectre. You're exhausted, broke, and listening to the same tavern tales about legendary killers who probably never existed. Remember that muddy ditch from last night. It's waiting for the next contract, because this is your wheel, turning slow and sticky. No glory, no escape, just the quiet grind of failure dressed as opportunity. Tomorrow, maybe the widow asks questions again, and you smile through gritted teeth. You shuffle into the royal courtyard at first light, not as some dashing courtier, but as the guy who carries the wax seals and the endless stack of parchments that make kings look busy. The air smells like wet stone and yesterday's feast gone slightly off, and your boots squelch on flagstones that haven't been properly swept since Michaelmas. This isn't the glittering intrigue of legends, it's you, waiting outside the privy chamber while the Duke argues with his steward about how many candles to order for next week's banquet. You've got a list. Petitions from farmers about boundary disputes, merchants begging tax relief, and that one baron who swears his neighbor's pigs are sabotage. Your job: make sure every complaint gets written down, stamped, and filed in a chest that no one ever opens again. Court politics sounds thrilling until you live it. It's mostly you standing in drafty hallways, ink-stained fingers freezing as you scratch out the same phrases. His Grace decrees. A mainstream historical fact anchors this tedium. During the 14th century, the English royal court generated over 100 zeros and documents annually, most dealing with mundane land grants and debt collection rather than dramatic plots. You're not plotting regicide. You're negotiating travel expenses for the herald who has to ride 20 miles to tell some knight his taxes are late. The client, today it's a minor earl, whispers his real request nudge the king toward favouring his wool trade over the rivals. But nudging means hours of side conversations, backroom nods, and avoiding the spymaster who smells ulterior motives like a hound on cold meat. Historians still argue whether these petty bureaucratic battles shaped history more than the big wars. Some say the real power was held by the clerks who controlled the records, quietly burying inconvenient truths under mountains of wax and ribbon. Your day drags morning council means you perch on a stool, quill poised, as nobles drone about crop yields and river rights. My lord's mill takes too much water, one whines. Nonsense, it's always been thus. Counters another. You nod. Scribble and suppress a yawn that could get you flogged. Lunch is a hunk of bread and ale in the scullery, where servants gossip about the Queen's new gown. Same cut as last season, just fancier embroidery. Joke 1: if courtiers were a sport, The gold medal would go to whoever stalls a decision longest without getting beheaded. Afternoon brings petitions, endless lines of supplicants with tales of woe that all boil down to, "He has more sheep than me." You mediate or pretend to, jotting notes that vanish into the archive abyss. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some courts kept complaint logs with doodles in the margins, kings sketching hounds while scribes recorded feuds, proving even royalty zoned out during the grind. Remember that assassin ditch from a few nights back. Here, intrigue feels equally futile. You slip a favorable note into the pile, but it gets reshuffled by a rival clerk who hates your face. Evenings mean copying duplicates by candlelight, eyes burning as wax drips and shadows dance like they're mocking your life choices. Travel claims are the true soul crusher. That earl wants reimbursement for his messenger's horse fodder. 3 shillings, he insists, though records show 2 last time. You haggle in whispers. "My lord, the rate is fixed." He blusters, you placate. Joke 2 court accountants invented passive aggression centuries before emails. By dusk, you're sealing the final decree, fingers black with ink, back knotted from hunching. Nobles retire to dine. You trudge to your truckle bed in the undercroft, dreaming of a world without ledgers. But tomorrow brings more, whispers of alliance shifts that mean rewriting every treaty draft because someone changed their mind about a Dory clause. The sarcasm seeps in during quiet moments, all this for a king who barely reads half the scrolls you slave over. Sensory details ground the monotony. Cold ink that never warms, parchment that crinkles like dry leaves, the endless scratch of quills echoing in stone halls. Joke 3, if boredom were taxable, you'd owe the crown a fortune. Yet callbacks linger, that assassin's pouch of silver. It started here in a clerk's falsified expense report. Continuity binds the court. Petty feuds fuel hires demand more paperwork, and the wheel spins on. You blow out your candle, the flame guttering like your ambitions, and settle into sleep knowing dawn brings the same stack, the same whispers, the same nothing. You hunker down outside the castle walls with the rest of the army, not in some heroic charge but in a muddy camp that's already starting to smell like wet dog and despair after just 3 days. The siege has been going for a month now, and the only action you've seen is a single arrow that whizzed harmlessly over the parapet yesterday, probably loosed by a bored sentry who missed his lunch. Your job today is the same as yesterday, man the ram crew, which means you and 5 others take turns pushing a massive log on wheels toward the gatehouse, only to retreat when the defenders dump boiling oil or loose a volley of rocks. But mostly you just wait. Weeks of waiting, eating cold rations, and wondering if the siege will end before winter turns the ground into a skating rink of filth. Siege warfare was the medieval equivalent of a government shutdown. Long, expensive, and full of posturing that rarely led to actual results. A mainstream historical fact cuts through the myth during the 100 Years' War. Sieges like the one at Orleans in 1428-29 lasted months, with armies burning through supplies faster than they could forage, leading to more deaths from dysentery than enemy steel. You're stirring the communal pot of grain porridge for the 10th day in a row, the stuff so thick it clings to your spoon like regret. No variety, no spices, just oats, water, and whatever questionable greens you scavenged from the hedgerows. Your stomach growls not from hunger but from the monotony you'd kill for a turnip that wasn't half rotten. The quirky fringe detail. Some siege masters tried starvation sieges, enhanced by catapulting diseased animal carcasses over the walls, not for plague warfare, but because rotting donkey parts made the defenders gag on their own meals, turning psychological tedium into a weapon. Historians still argue whether prolonged sieges were strategic genius or just lazy commanders avoiding pitched battles, where they'd risk losing everything in one afternoon. You lean against the ram's frame during your off-watch, boots sinking into the churned earth as rain patters endlessly on your ill-fitting helmet. The sensory assault is relentless, mud squelching between toes, the constant low moan of wind through guy ropes, the distant clank of enemy blacksmiths hammering arrowheads you'll never see. Joke one if sieges had Yelp reviews, it'd be 1 star for endless porter, potty lines and zero Wi-Fi. Your mates swap stories to pastime, same tales of home, embellished slightly each telling, while you whittle a stick into nothing, fingers numb from cold. Nights blur into days under torchlight and sputtering campfires. You draw ditch duty, digging latrines that fill as fast as you shovel the stench of permanent fog. Officers bark orders for sapping, tunneling under the walls, but progress is glacial, inches per day against rock-hard soil. Remember that court clerks' endless parchments. Orders trickle down the same way, advance at dawn. Except dawn brings fog, then drizzle, then nothing. Afternoons mean foraging parties, you trudging miles for firewood that smokes more than it burns, dodging peasants who hate you for trampling their fields. Evenings drag with dice games using knucklebones, bets too small to matter. Laughter forced against the knowledge that supplies dwindle while the castle's granaries mock you from afar. The true grind hits during lulls, hours staring at battlements where defenders taunt with gestures and catcalls, but no one commits. You polish your sword, not for glory, but because rust spreads faster than rumors in this damp. Joke 2, your blade's sharper than your hope of rotation home. Scurvy creeps in, gums bleed from lack of greens, teeth loosen like bad omens. Medical care is a barber surgeon lancing boils with a dirty blade, muttering about humours while you grit teeth. Callbacks weave through, that assassin's ditch was luxury, compared to this open latrine we call a camp. Tensions simmer not from combat but cabin fever, fights over the last dry blanket, whispers of desertion punished by keel hauling over hot coals. By month's end, parley horns sound, not surrender, but negotiation over ransoms and safe passage. You watch envoys haggle under white flags, terms unchanged from last week. Joke 3, sieges prove humans tire faster than stone walls. The ram gathers dust, you slump by the fire, embers dying like enthusiasm, knowing tomorrow replays today. No trumpets, no glory, just the slow suck of mud and the porridge pot's eternal bubble. This is war's boring heart, where heroes become ghosts haunting their own tedium. You wake up slick with sweat before dawn, the inside of your soul called or more, already feeling like a personal sauna from hell, even though the night air nips at your nose through the visor slits. Strapping on this metal torture device isn't a heroic ritual. It's a grueling ordeal of bending, twisting, and cursing under your breath as you wrestle with buckles that never quite line up. The breastplate alone weighs as much as a small child, pressing down on your shoulders like an unwelcome relative who won't leave. Your squire, some pimply youth who resents this job more than you do, yanks at the straps, muttering about how the last night split a seam mid-tournament because someone cheaped out on rivets. Medieval armor wasn't the shiny, ergonomic masterpiece of movies. It was a clanking, chafing nightmare designed by committee and built by blacksmiths who prioritized cost over comfort. A mainstream historical fact sets the scene: full-plate armor from the 15th century could weigh 45 to 65 pounds, distributed unevenly so your knees buckled first and your lower back screamed second. You're finally suited up, waddling like a tin duck toward the practice yard, every step a reminder that mobility was a joke. Jogging meant clanking like a peddler's cart, and God forbid you fall, because getting up solo was like a turtle trying to moonwalk. The quirky fringe tidbit: some knights slathered themselves in pig fat or lanolin grease before suiting up, claiming it prevented chafing. Mostly it just made them smell like a barnyard lure and attracted every fly within a mile. Historians still argue whether armor evolution favored protection over practicality, or if knights secretly hated it as much as the foot soldiers they trampled. Chronicles hint at nobles ditching plate for lytle during long campaigns, trading invulnerability for the ability to breathe. You reach the yard, sweat trickling down your spine in rivers, pooling in every crevice where leather meets skin. The helmet's like a sweat trap, vision narrows to slits fogged by your own breath, ears muffled so orders sound like whale song. Sensory hell unfolds. Metal creaks with every shift, straps dig into hips like spiteful fingers, and the weight tilts you forward, turning a simple shield raise into a full-body negotiation. Joke one, if armor had a slogan, it'd be, "Swipe, equity or die trying." Morning drill drags. You lumber through footwork patterns, legs burning as graves pinch calves roar. Remember that siege camp mud? Your boots are worse, caked inside with yesterday's grime fermenting into foot soup. Lunch offers no mercy. A hasty bite of cheese through your visor baffle, crumbs lodging where you can't reach. Afternoons mean mounted practice, hoisting yourself onto a horse that's eyeing your tin can bulk like you're a bad joke. The saddle creaks ominously, every trot jars your spine, pauldrons digging into neck like bonny elbows. Chafing blooms, thighs raw under kisses, armpits festering under vambraces. That pig fat, it's sliding south, turning your small clothes into a slip-end slide disaster. Laundry day's the true crusher. Off comes the armor in reverse agony. Squire prees pieces free while you peel sodden gambeson like a molting snake. Rust flakes everywhere. You scrub with vinegar and straw, fingers pruned and stinging. Polish takes hours, linseed oil rubbed into every joint, buffing until your arms scream louder than your back. Joke 2 nights invented carpal tunnel centuries before keyboards. One breastplate at a time. Evenings bring repairs, resharpening dents from training that felt like brawling a wall. Callbacks echoed, court ledgers funded this mess. That assassin's cloak would feel like pajamas by comparison. Nights offer no respite. You sleep in partial kit, greaves and a chainmail pillow, because dawn means suiting up again. Itches multiply under unyielding steel. Dreams twist into nightmares of eternal buckling. The itch-scratch impossibility drives men mad to flee under your cuirass. Eternal torment. Joke 3's armor's real enemy wasn't arrows. It was the medieval equivalent of wool itch cream. Hygiene's a myth, urine, soaked straw pads. Cushioned joints, breeding blisters that popped mid-jost. By week's end, you're a walking blister, stench preceding you like a herald. Remember the porridge grind. This is that, but armored, relentless, sweaty, unforgiving. You unbuckle for bed, metal sighing relief, knowing dawn restarts the itch. You settle onto the hard wooden stool in the scriptorium at Matins Bell. The chill stone floor seeping through your thin woolen sandals like an uninvited guest who overstays every winter. The air hangs heavy with damp vellum scent and flickering rushlight smoke that stings your eyes before you've even unrolled the first parchment. This isn't some sacred calling with angelic choirs. It's you, a monk who's been copying the exact same gospel passages since you took vows at 15. Facing another 12 hours where your world shrinks to the size of a single page. Your quill hand already aches in anticipation, knuckles stiff from yesterday's marathon as you mix ink from oak galls and iron salts that never quite dissolve right. Monastic manuscript work formed the backbone of medieval literacy, with monasteries like those in 9th century Carolingian Europe producing tens of thousands of codices that preserved everything from scripture to secular texts. You're illuminating today's page, a tedious psalm verse you've transcribed 100 times, pricking margins with a pin to keep lines straight, ruling with a lead point that smudges if you breathe wrong, the quirky fringe tidbit. Some monks added secret doodles in margins, obscene caricatures of knights with exaggerated anatomy, or bishops chasing nuns, tiny rebellions against the monotony scratched where abbots wouldn't notice. Your back screams by prime. The sloped desk forces a permanent hunch, spine curving like the parchment you're bending over. Sensory details assault, candle wax plopping rhythmically, the scratch of 20 quills in unison, wool robe itching against sweat, damp skin in the unventilated chill. Historians still argue whether these copying marathons were acts of devotion or forced labor. Some chronicles hint at monks sabotaging work with deliberate errors to protest endless drudgery. You pause for sexed prayers, kneeling on numb knees, then back to grinding, pouncing the page with chalk, dust to absorb grease, burnishing gold leaf that flakes onto your lap like fool's treasure. Joke 1. If salvation came per word copied, you'd be sainted by lunch, but heaven's paperwork backlog says otherwise. Remember that armor sweat fest? Here it's ink sweat, fingers perpetually black, nails split from prying curled vellum flat. Afternoons drag into historiated initials, painting vines and beasts with lapis lazuli that costs more than your yearly bread, brush strokes so fine your eyes cross by nuns. The true backbreaker hits during winter, days shortening to 4 hours of usable light, forcing you to hood a lantern that smokes your face black while straining over crabbed Carolingian minuscule script. Hand cramps seize mid-letter. You shake them out, flexing like a man drowning in routine. Callbacks weave in siege porridge tastes gourmet compared to your watery pottage, gulpable between folios. Evenings mean collation, comparing your copy against the exemplar, erasing errors with a pumice stone that rasps skin raw. Joke 2. Scribes invented carpal tunnel, with psalms as the culprit. Eye-strained blooms letters dancing after hours, headaches pulsing like Abbott's sermons. The fringe rebellion tempts, a quick demon doodle in the gutter margin, but discipline reins you in. Nights offer scant mercy. You collapse onto your straw pallet, fingers too ink cramped to clasp for compline prayers properly. Dreams replay uncial curves twisting into knots. Tomorrow restarts at vigil's same psalms, same hunch, same ache radiating from neck to tailbone. That court clerk's ledgers, child's play beside your folio tums binding choirs with leather thongs that snap if tension's off. Joke 3. Monks prayed for bad weather to skip field work, forgetting it meant double scriptorium shifts in gloom. Exhaustion layers like vellum sheets, muscle memory takes over, quill dipping automatically while mind wanders to impossible vacations. Yet the wheel turns prick, rule, write, illuminate, repeat. Your spine settles into its curve, permanent as illuminated halos, as the bell tolls another cycle's start. You fumble with the lancet in the dim healer's alcove, the iron tool cold against your collused palm as you eye the patient's outstretched arm. Another farmer with a swollen knee from overworking the plough. No dramatic incantations or miracle cures here. You're just another medieval practitioner sloshing through the same humoral routines that haven't changed since Galen muttered about imbalances centuries ago. The air reeks of vinegar and drying herbs hanging from rafters, mingled with the sour tang of unwashed bodies lining up outside your door. You've got a leech jar bubbling on the shelf, wriggling black horrors ready for their next treatment. Because bleeding out bad blood is still step 1 through 5 in every diagnosis. Medieval medicine revolved around the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and balancing them through purgatives, bleedings, and waiting games that let time do what your herbs couldn't. A mainstream historical fact underscores the tedium. By the 13th century, European physicians performed over 1 million documented phlebotomies annually, slicing veins with tools barely sharper than bread knives, while patients fainted from boredom more than blood loss. You lance the vein, warm blood trickling into a bowl as the man grits his teeth. Standard procedure for excess heat, which covers everything from headaches to bad moods. The quirky fringe tidbit: healers in Anglo-Saxon England prescribed beetle therapy, grinding scarab beetles into pastes for eye ailments, swearing the crunch provided vital spirits that mostly just made patients gag politely. Historians still argue whether these practices stemmed from genuine belief or resigned pragmatism. Did doctors know half their cures were placebos, or was blind faith the only shield against admitting medicine's limits? You move to the next patient, a child with flux, pressing a poultice of mustard plasters and boiled onions to her belly while murmuring about aligning the stars. Sensory drudgery overwhelms, the wet suck of leeches latching, herbal steam curling into your eyes, the endless drip of blood bowls emptied into the yard. Joke 1: if patience were a pill, you'd be out of business overnight. Remember that scriptorium hunch. Your back fares worse here, bent over suppurating wounds that weep puss like overripe fruit. Mornings mean herb grinding, pounding willow bark for aches, foxglove for dropsy. That kills half your heart cases anyway. Pestles thud rhythmically against stone mortars, wrists aching from repetition, while apprentices chop garlic that burns sinuses raw. Afternoons drag into diagnostics, urine wheels spun to judge color and taste. Yes, taste. Sweet for diabetes, bitter for bile. You swirl a flask, sip grimly, declare phlegmatic imbalance, prescribe more laxatives. Joke 2, urine tasting invented the medieval low-sodium diet. Callbacks linger, siege dysentery floods your queue, armor blisters fester without your salves. Evenings bring plague fears, customers begging preventives like 4 thieves vinegar, which is mostly garlic and wishful thinking. The waiting game defines it all. You apply your treacle of theriac, 60 odd ingredients boiled for days, tasting like regret, and send them home to rest. Most recover despite you, or because bodies heal themselves while you brew. Blisters from ill, fitting shoes get egg yolk rubs, toothache is clove oil that numbs nothing permanently. Joke 3. Doctors prayed for quick deaths to shorten consultations. No breakthroughs, just cycles cut, bleed, purge, wait. Nights you collapse amid drying sage bundles, dreams haunted by lancet flashes. Tomorrow restarts, same jars, same grimaces, same humours refusing balance. That monk's psalms offer more cure than your craft, yet the line reforms at dawn, hope's tedium eternal. You rise before the roosters have even cleared their throats, the pre-dawn air thick with dew that soaks through your threadbare cloak as you check the mule's loads for the 100th time this week. Your merchant's ledger, greasy parchment stuffed with wax tallies, lists bolts of wool from Bruges, pepper sacks from Venice, and that one risky crate of Baltic amber you're praying clears customs without another bribe. This isn't the swashbuckling Silk Road of legends. It's you haggling with Venetian wholesalers over quarter-ounce discrepancies while your interpreter pretends not to skim. The wagon creaks under uneven weight, axlers groaning like your patience, as you lash down the final bundle and climb aboard for another soul, numbing leg toward the next corrupt toll station. Medieval trade routes thrived on volume over velocity, with merchants like 13th century Genoese traders moving goods across 5,000 miles at speeds averaging 15 miles per day, slower than a brisk walk, thanks to breakdowns and border shakedowns. You're fording a shallow ford now, water sloshing calf deep while your beasts balk at the current, forcing you to wade in and whip their flanks until they lurch forward. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some Silk Road caravans employed, oath breakers insurance. Special clauses swearing by saints that your pepper wasn't adulterated with dirt, complete with notary seals and saintly relic witnesses that did nothing when thieves struck anyway. Hours tick by in jolting silence, broken only by the harness jingle and your muttered curses at mud-clogged wheels. Historians still argue whether trade profits justified the tedium. Did merchants endure years away from home for wealth, or was it just generational inertia trapping sons in fathers' ruts? Sensory slog defines the journey, wool, bales reek of lanolin and sheep panic. Spices prickle your nose with false promises of exotic meals you'll never taste. Blisters bloom under your palms from rope-burned hauling. Rain turns paths to suction traps that claim a sandal by noon. Joke 1: if boredom filed taxes, you'd owe the emperor back to Rome. Remember that healer's leeches. Yours are metaphorical. Customs men bleeding tariffs at every ford, quibbling over weight creep from damp wool while palming your silver. Midday halt means cold pasties and brackish water from a roadside spring, shared with fellow traders swapping the same complaints. Bandits hit the pass last Lammas, or that Basil Guild jack duties again. Afternoons grind into haggling pit stops. Village squares where you weigh bolts on unreliable balances, arguing fractions with locals who shortchange via slate of thumb. Your interpreter mangles Latin idioms, turning fair exchange into accidental insults that spark fist-shaking standoffs resolved by more coin. Evenings camp under threadbare tents, cooking salt pork over smoky fires while auditing tallies by rushlight, ink smudges erasing a day's profit. Joke 2. Merchants invented spreadsheets centuries before quill met graph paper. Corruption layers the route like dust, tollkeepers demand, roadware fees. For paths they never mend, innkeeps water your all while overcharging for straw pallets crawling with lice. That amber crate, it draws envy. Fellow traders eye it like siege cooks-eyed porridge pots. Callbacks bind the tedium armor chafed less than these saddle sores. Court petitions flew faster than your paperwork snagged at borders. Nights bring wolf howls and guard rotations where you nod off mid-watch, waking to frost-rimed beard. Dreams replay tallies unbalanced. By journey's end, weeks later, you unload in a clamour of porters and guild inspectors nitpicking weave counts, pocketing your margin minus bribes. Joke 3. Trade's real cargo was patience taxed heavier than silk. Tomorrow restarts repack, rehaggle, replod. The road owns you endless as the ledgers. You pace the drafty great hall of your castle. Not the soaring fortress of tournaments and intrigue, but a stone box where tapestries flap like sad flags and the fire spits more smoke than warmth. Dawn filters through arrow-slit windows too narrow for decent light, illuminating the same oak table scarred from decades of elbows and dull knives. You're a noble, which sounds glamorous until you realize it means staring at harvest tallies while your steward drones about manorial yields. Every conversation circling back to sheep counts and tide disputes. No grand quests here. Your adventure is inspecting the same muddy fields you've walked since childhood, wondering if this year's blight will finally break you. Nobles in medieval Europe owned vast estates but lived in stifling isolation, with 14th century records showing barons spending 80% of their time on administrative drudgery rather than warfare or romance. You summon your bailiff for the morning reckoning. Parchment rolls unrolled like accusing fingers, detailing how many bushels of barley versus last Michaelmas. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some nobles kept boredom pets. Exotic birds like popinjays imported from distant markets, trained to mimic phrases like more wine or taxes due, providing the only conversation variety in months of echoing halls. Your hounds sprawl by the hearth, farting softly as you nod through reports of fence, mending costs and villain runaways who always return shivering. Historians still argue whether noble boredom fueled the Renaissance patronage boom. Did idle aristocrats fund art just to escape their own echoing skulls? Or was it genuine piety dressed as culture? Evenings loom emptiest sunset kills all light, leaving you with dice games where stakes are feathers or promises. Tales retold until punchlines elicit groans. Sensory ennui clings like damp. Wool hangings smell of lye and mildew. Mid-tastes flatter each night. Rushes underfoot crunch with yesterday's bones. Joke 1. If castles had Netflix, you'd burn through the queue by epiphany. Remember that merchant's endless road. Yours loops inside stone walls, pacing from solar to chapel, reciting the same paternosters. Afternoons mean hunt planning. Not thundering chases, but half-day slogs through brambles where deer outsmart you every time, returning with one scrawny hair split 6 ways. Dinner drags. Trenches of pottage identical to lunch. Minstrels plucking the same ballads you've hummed since knighting. Conversation recycles. Uncle Baldwin's Crusader yarn, now on its 17th, telling with embellishments thinning like your hair. Joke 2. Nobles invented small talk, perfecting it over centuries of forced family dinners. Colback's echo siege waits felt brisk beside your council marathons debating Dovercoat permits. Winter bites hardest, days shrinking to firelit huddles where frost paints windows silver and pipes freeze mid-song. You pore over illuminated missals by tallow, eyes watering, or embroider heraldic badges with needles that prick vengefully. That scriptorium monk copies faster than your quill traces alliances nobody honors. Entertainment? Falconry where birds sulk more than fly, or chess sets carved last Yule, positions memorized after 50 games. Joke 3. Boredom's the noble curse, peasants work, you wait, nights blend into wool, draped beds alive with bedbugs marching in formation. Dreams replay tallies unbalanced, hunts unfinalized, dawn cracks the shutters, steward knocks with fresh rolls. The hall awaits, echo chamber eternal. Your title a gilded cage where tomorrow mirrors today in every smoky detail. You sling the leather satchel over your shoulder at cockcrow, the weight of blank parchments and inkwells already tugging at your neck like an impatient bailiff. The village square looms ahead, mud still slick from last night's drizzle, where farmers huddle over their first aisle, eyes narrowing as you approach with the tax rolls, same dog-eared pages you've lugged since Lady Day. This isn't heroic debt collection, it's you, the tax collector, trudging from hovel to hall, arguing over pennies while dodging excuses sharper than scythes. Your boots sink into ruts worn by a decade of this circuit, breath fogging in the crisp air that carries the faint rot of last harvest's failures. Feudal taxation formed the economic glue of medieval society, with England's 13th century pipe rolls documenting millions in levies collected door to door, funding wars that collectors like you never saw. You knock at the first croft, where old Wat thrusts forward a handful of grimy silver, short by 2 pence, as always. Bad lambing master, he wheezes. You haggle scratching adjustments while his wife glares daggers. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some collectors accepted, kind. Payments like live chickens or dented pots, leading to comical audits where Reeves tollied feathers instead of farthings. Parchment multiplies in your bag. Each farm yields a stub, smudged with thumbprints and excuses, piling into illiterate mountains. Historians still argue whether tax resistance sparked more revolts than royal greed. Did peasants rebel against rates, or the endless audits that turned harvest home into accounting hell? Mornings blur into door, kicking Widow Agnans claims widow's exemption, though her nephew lounges suspiciously. You measure her grain bins, quill-scratching yields while she mutters curses. Sensory grind bites, ink freezes in the well. All breath sours every negotiation. Mud cakes hymns like unpaid debts. Joke one: if taxes grew on trees, you'd still spend all day pruning excuses. Remember that noble's drafty hall? His coffers fill from your mud-spattered tallies. Afternoons stretch to manor courts, where you preside over villein squabbles. His ox trampled my kale, adjudicating fines that barely cover your horse fodder. Ledgers swells, crosses for illiterates, Roman numerals for carts of hay, tallies notched on sticks when parchment runs dry. Arguments loop, boom years mean ording, claims, famines bring pleas of poverty. You tramp miles between holdings, horse lamed half the time, blisters festering under wool stockings. Joke 2. Tax collectors invented the audit trail, one muddy boot print at a time. Evenings mean tavern tallies by rushlight. Innkeeper watering your all while you balance books that never square. Callbacks haunt the rout. Merchant bribes mirror your tips. Siege porridge is costlier than these skimped tithers. That healer's poultices you'd trade for one on feet pounded raw. Corruption tempts, a blind eye to watch shortfall for a brace of cunnies. But audits loom from shire courts. Joke 3. Peasants hated you less than their own math. Nights crash on straw pallets crawling with lice, dreams of unbalanced columns. Dawn restarts satchel heavy. Square waiting, rolls unrolling like fate. Illegible scrawls blur into one endless debt. Your life the grindstone sharpening their pennies into the Lord's gold. You stumble out to the stable at first cockcrow, the air biting your knuckles as you muck out the stalls. Pitchfork heavy with yesterday's manure that steams in the chill like it's personally offended by dawn. Your horse, let's call him Slog, because that's what life feels like on his back, eyes you with the enthusiasm of a rock, flicking an ear as if to say, not today, peasant. This isn't the noble steed of ballads, thundering into battle. It's a sway-bagged nag demanding endless grooming, feeding, and placating before he'll even consider carrying you 3 miles without balking. Your hands chap raw from brushing his flea-bit hide, currycomb snagging on mud knots that never fully come out. Horses-powered medieval life, but records from 14th century France show knights spent more hours on veterinary care than riding, with chroniclers noting beasts ate better than half the grooms tending them. You mix mash, oats soaked overnight, lest slog colics and leaves you stranded mid-errand, stirring the gluey mess while he nudges your ribs for extras. The quirky fringe tidbit, some breeders swore by, lucky. Horseshoes nailed upside down to trap good fortune, but mostly they just rusted through, crippling beasts faster than road bandits. Farrier work looms you heat shoes in the forge, hammering to fit his uneven hooves while he stamps and snorts, singeing your sleeve for the third time this month. Historians still argue whether knights romanticized horses to justify the upkeep costs, or if the beast's unreliability sparked more logistical failures than enemy lances. Mornings drag into tack checks, saddles warped from sweat, bridles frayed where slog chews in boredom. You saddle up for market run, but he shays at a shadow, dumping your reins in mud. Sensory torment builds ammonia stink clings to wool, curry scent soars on skin, harness leather creaks like breaking promises. Joke 1. Horses invented passive resistance long before mules got credit. Remember that tax satchel's weight? Slog's saddlebags sag heavier with his essentials. Extra shoes salve for girth goals he gets anyway. Afternoons mean pasture checks, you trudging fences while he grazes selectively, ignoring thistles that later bloat him. Lameness strikes weakly, stone bruise thrush, colic from gulping spring grass. You poultice hooves with turpentine stinking like pine hell, walking him hours to settle guts. That healer's lancet, you'd borrow it for slog's endless abscesses. Joke 2 farriers charged by the curse word, and you're bankrupting yourself. Colback's echo, siege camps starved quicker without reliable mounts, armor chafed less than saddle sores blooming under your thighs. Grooming evenings crush souls. You sponge his dock, picking ticks fatter than your wages main, plating against flies that swarm anyway. He naps while you sweat, tail swishing your face like a metronome of misery. Nights bring vigil, slog founders from founder-prone oats, you walking him by moonlight, reins slick with dew. Joke 3 horses needed more coddling than noble hares. Demands never cease water hauling, fly repellents of vinegar and sulfur that blind you both. Dreams replay books and bucking. Dawn restarts muck mash mount. Unreliable as lovers, needy as infants. Slog owns you. His grind the wheel turning your days into endless stable shadow. You kneel in the dim nave as the vigil's bell tolls its third peal. The stone floor grinding into your knees like gravel under prayer, while the antiphon echoes off vaulted arches. Same 7 verses you've chanted since boyhood. Voices blending into a drone that could lull stone saints to sleep. Your wool scapula itches against sweat from the unventilated crypt chill, beads clicking through fingers collused from endless decades of the same looped rituals. This isn't divine ecstasy or mystic visions, it's you, marking time through the divine office. Vigils, lauds, prime terce, sext, nuns, vespers, compline. 8 daily anchors pulling your life into repetitive eternity, bells dictating breath like a taskmaster's whip. Medieval religious life pulsed to the canonical hours, with monasteries like Cluny enforcing over 100 prayer services weekly, preserving liturgy through rote recitation that outlasted generations. You rise for lauds as dawn grays the east window, shuffling to choir stalls worn smooth by centuries of shifting weight, intuning psalms in monotone Latin that your tongue knows better than your own name. The quirky fringe tidbit, some orders rang silent bells. Ropes tugged to vibrate clappers without sound, for nocturnal vigils, sparing neighbors the 2 a.m. racket while monks mimed the toll in fingered cymbals like deranged puppeteers. Your throat rasps by prime, same Gloria Patri loops, harmonies flattened by fatigue into white noise. Historians still argue whether ritual repetition bred genuine piety or numbed souls into automaton faith. Did monks feel transcendence amid tedium, or just envy the ploughman's earlier sleep? Sensory saturation drags incense coils thick as fog, stinging sinuses, wax gutters plopping onto flagstones. Psalter's vellum whispering page turns in unison, Joke 1. If prayer were currency, you'd be bankrupt from overdrafts on the same amends. Remember that horse's endless mucking. Your hours feel muckier. Prime's washing of hands in holy water that's been blessed since Easter. Terce's chapter reading where the abbot drones rule clauses you've memorized backward. Afternoons grind through sexton nuns. Bell ropes fraying your palms as you haul the tenor whose tenor pitch hasn't varied since consecration. Vespers brings minor variety. Different antiphons, same Magnificat, while Compline seals night with De Profundis, voices fading like dying embers. Evenings mean matins, prep robes donned, tonsures combed, faces scrubbed of day's grime for vigil's midnight restart. Joke 2. Monks invented the alarm clock, calling it God's snooze button. Cullbacks linger. Merchant roads raced faster than your psalm cycles. Armor itched less than scapular chafe from eternal kneeling. Winter amplifies agony. Breath clouds during matins, fingers too numb for sign of the cross. Psalms slurred into mumbles. Summer sweats through unyielding wool. Sexts heat turning choir into steam bath where voices wilt mid-verse. That scriptorium quill cramp. Yours stems from bead clicking marathons, knuckles swollen like overripe plums. Joke 3. Saints interceded more for sore knees than sinners. Dreams replay antiphons twisted into knots. Bells toll vigils anew, same vault shadows, same vaulted groans, same eternal wheel-wet psalms circle like hounds chasing their tails. Ritual owns you, repetition your relic, faith's grandstone polishing time into translucent boredom. You stoke the forge at dawn's first blush, bellows wheezing like asthmatic elders as you coax coals into sullen glow. The heat already prickling your bare arms, while frost lingers on the anvil like it knows you'll be here till dusk. Your hammer awaits, scarred from decades pounding the same horseshoes, nails, and plowshares that break as fast as you mend them. Repetitive metalwork that turns innovation into heresy and accidents into apprentices' scars. This isn't blacksmith artistry of legend. It's you, sweat-soaked and soot-grimed, shaping iron day after unchanging day in a workshop where the only variety is which hammer rebounds off your shin first. Blacksmiths anchored medieval economies, with 13th century English manorial records showing smiths producing over 80% horseshoes and agricultural tools, their forges running 12-hour shifts to keep plows turning before seed time. You heat the first bar, tongs biting palms collused thick as leather, hammering glowing iron on anvil rings that echo through your skull like perpetual headache. Sparks shower, singeing hairs, the quirky fringe tidbit. Some smiths quench blades in urine for strength, claiming peasants' morning relief added vital salts. Mostly it just made the shop reek like a latrine luau and rusted tools twice as fast. Your rhythm sets in heat, pound, shape, quench, repeat, each shoe identical to yesterday's dozen. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths drove technological stagnation by perfecting repetition over experimentation. Did their guild monopolies stifle new designs, or was iron's stubborn nature the true taskmaster? Mornings blur into plough points, you draw out metal with flat-faced hammer, folding and welding layers while bellows blast lungs scorching smoke. Sensory inferno builds coal acrid on tongue, hammer, vibration numbing arms to jelly, quench steam scalding shins through wool hose. Joke 1. If hell existed, Satan outsourced hammering duties to smiths on earth. Remember that monk's psalm loops, yours ring louder, anvil symphony sans finale, afternoons shift to nails, hundreds pounded from rods, heads upset in dies that slip half the time, thumbs smashed purple. Horseshoeing drags worst beasts stampede you're in step, hooves cracking when you nick the frog, owners haggling price while you bite back curses. That tax collector's arguments, yours end in blood blisters. Joke 2. Farriers shoed horses faster than wives tolerated limps home. Callbacks weave siege rams needed your spikes, armor repairs clogged your queue for weeks. Innovations, rare. A plowshare edge holds longer but gilds fine, meddling, faster than you quench. Evenings mean pot mending, you braise leaks with spelter that spits like angry cats, flux fumes burning sinuses roar. Accidental sparks ignite straw, again. while apprentices pump bellows like galley slaves. That healer's poultices soothe your burns barely. Nights collapse on soot-caked pallet, dreams replay hammer arcs. Joke 3. Smiths spark the Renaissance by hammering out frustration on anvils instead of heads. Tomorrow restarts coals raked, bellows primed, iron waiting. Stifling heat owns you, repetition your rosary. Forge, glow the only light in metal's monotonous dance. You circle your opponent in the misty tournament field at terse bell, swords crossed in formal salute. Not the cinematic clash of legends, but two armored lumps fumbling through prescribed steps while onlookers yawn into their awl. Your blade feels leaden after yesterday's polishing marathon, grip slick with palm sweat despite the morning chill that crusts the grass white. This duel isn't about honor or vengeance, it's a contractual squabble over grazing rights, where victory means a judge's nod and defeat means paying the old tab. You lunge tentatively, steel scraping in a shower of sparks that singes your hose, only for him to parry clumsily and stagger back, both of you panting like blacksmith's bellows after 10 heartbeats. Medieval duels rarely ended in Hollywood deaths. 14th century judicial combat records from France show over 70% concluded in exhaustion, surrender, or mutual collapse rather than fatal blows. You circle again, fainting high while your legs burn from grave weight, boots sucking mud with every pivot that twists your ankles sideways. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some combatants slathered weapons with duelist's ointment, a stinkweed paste meant to irritate eyes through visor slits, turning bouts into sneezing contests where the winner was whoever blinked less. Your arms ache from overhead guards, sweat blinds one eye, helmet muffling his grunts to dull thuds. Spectators chant half-heartedly, more interested in the pie seller than your flailing. Historians still argue whether most duels were genuine tests of skill or staged theatrics to satisfy legal rituals. Did champions truly risk death, or did they conspire to tire quickly and split fines? The bout drags, you bind blades in a grapple that smells of rust and desperation, knees buckling as you shove for leverage. He slips first, sprawling face down in muck. Victory by default, no blood spilled, just mutual loathing and a magistrate's board decree. Sensory chaos reigns, mud grimes your mouth guard, chainmail chafes neck, raw crowds ull, breath wafts thick. Joke 1. Duels proved chivalry died of boredom before blades touched. Remember that forge hammering. Yours echoes in every wary swing. Post-fight drudge Beansy Jerry awaits you limp to the judging tent, squire stripping dented plate while you dictate terms. Half the fine now, half at Martinmas. Loser glares, nursing a sprained wrist you'll splint later. Afternoon's mean rematch prep, blunted swords resharpened Zelire for practice. Footwork drilled on turf that's more puddle than pitch. That healer's leeches. Yours await for bruises blooming purple. Joke 2. Knights trained harder for standing upright than stabbing accurately. Callbacks bindees siege waits felt shorter than these circling eternities. Horsebalks less than duelists dodging commitment. Evenings replay in taverns. Tales exaggerated over watery Isle, where I disarmed him thrice becomes legend by last call. Nights rack you with cramps, joints popping like hazelnuts. Joke 3. Duel's real killer was lactic acid, not lances. Tomorrow restarts, I salute, circle, flail, fall. Anticlimax owns the field, exhaustion your true foe, where fumbling trumps fury and surrender scents sweeter than blood. You stir awake to kitchen chaos at Lord's bell. The air thick with roasting meat, grease, and scullery steam that clings to your wool kirtle like a bad decision. Your role as feast overseer means corralling 20 cooks through a 3-day prep marathon for tonight's royal banquet. Not the glittering revelry of tapestries, but a logistical quagmire where venison haunches hang curing too long and turn gamey by serving. The great hall awaits, tables dragged into place while you bark orders over clanging pots, every course delayed by squabbling sauciers who can't agree on verjuice ratios. This isn't culinary artistry, it's you herding peasants through a menu that repeats seasonally, chaos masked as grandeur. Medieval feasts demanded Herculean prep, with 15th century Burgundian court records detailing banquets requiring 200 oxen, 200 sheep, and weeks of salting. Yet guests endured hours between removes while meats cooled on trenchers. You're portioning saltfish now, scales flaking into eyes as maids slice leeks that sting sinuses raw, the massive hearth belching smoke that blacks your teeth by prime. The quirky fringe tidbit. Cooks used feast illusions, hollow pastry subtlety shaped like castles, filled with live birds released mid-meal for gasps, except the gluey dough collapsed half the time, splattering nobles with feathers and fright. Your lists multiply tali spices from the buttery, check iwaras for hand-washing iwas, soothe pie, makers whose crusts weep grace rivers. Historians still argue whether feasts displayed power or hid scarcity. Did opulent spreads or guests, or did endless removes distract from empty cellars and famine whispers? Mornings dissolve into meat, turning you rotate spits for hours, arms screaming while fat drips sizzling into fires that scorch shins. Sensory onslaught peaks, garlic fumes choke throats, oven heat wilts hose at knees, endless chopping blurs fingers numb. Joke one feast's fed egos longer than stomachs, with courses colder than courtiers' smiles. Remember that duel's muddy tumble, your kitchen floor's slicks worse, made slipping on offal piles while you dodge scalding cauldrons. Afternoons drag serving prep, you taste sauces gone vinegary from standing, adjust with precious sugar that lumps anyway. Guests arrive fashionably late, hall echoing empty for an hour before first remove. Bread trenchers stamped with crests, already stale. Hours yawn between courses. Entertainers juggle while you rush subtleties from pastry. Live rabbits panicking inside pie crusts that crack mid-presentation. Joke 2. Banquets proved hunger sharpens faster than knives. Callbacks haunt siege porridges dreamed gourmet beside these congealed swans. Tax tallies funded this farce. Evenings peak in pandemonium, nobles picking at fowls stiffened by delay, wine spilling onto lennons as pages trip under platters. You lurk sidelines, refilling salts while guts twist from sampled scraps. That healer's humours, yours imbalance from grease overload. Joke 3. Feasts boredom lay in chewing what took days to ruin. Nights collapse amid dish mountains, dreams of eternal spits. Tomorrow restarts haunches hung, lists unrolled, chaos cloaked as hospitality's grind. You rise in the pre-dawn gloom of the castle mews, the air heavy with hay dust and raptor musk as you coax your assigned destrier colt from his loose box. Not the thundering warhorse of sagas, but a half-broke yearling more interested in nipping your sleeve than learning dressage. Your squire's life begins with mucking stalls deeper than your waist, pitchfork piercing the night's leavings while the colt stamps mud onto your chosses, already plotting his next escape. This isn't nightly glory, it's years of grind where you polish spurs till they blind you, only to spend nights curled on straw pallets dreaming of freedom that never comes. Your hands chapped raw from rope burns before breakfast, which is cold crusts gulpable while currying manes that tangle faster than you com. Squire training consumed noble youths for 7 to 14 years under feudal custom, with 14th century manuals like Fior di Liberi's detailing endless stable chores before swordplay ever entered the equation. You lug water buckets sloshing over boot tops to troughs that freeze overnight, breaking ice with bar blunt enough to bruise your shins. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some knights tested squires with loyalty cause, guarding privy pots overnight or polishing chamber pots till they gleamed, claiming it built humility steel, stronger than any blade temper. Your mornings stretch into harness checks bits, burnished with brick dust, saddles stuffed firm against galls that bloom anyway when the knight finally mounts for his desultory canter. Historians still argue whether squire drudgery forged better knights, or just broke spirits early. Did chores instill discipline, or did they breed resentment simmering through every fumbled lance salute? Afternoons mean yard duty. You hold stirrups while masters drill figures of 8 that bore the horses stiff, then walk lunges till your calves knot like rope. armor polishing Devars light, wire wheels on male links, vinegar baths for plate that etch your nose raw. Sensory misery layers. Ammonia stings from urine-soaked straw, currycomb bristles rake skin pink, endless boot, blacking leaves nails blacker than sin. Joke 1. Squires mucked more lives than manure before knighthood's tap. Remember that feast kitchen chaos. Your stable reeks worse. Maggots wrething in corners you can't scrub clean. Evenings drag into weapon drill. Blunted swords swung till shoulders scream. But mostly you're fetching shafts or sponging sweat from chamfrons while nights nap post-mead. That healer's blisters. Yours cluster under palms from re-in fights with colts who bolt at shadows. Joke 2. Dubbing ceremonies promised swords, reality delivered stable forks. Carlbach's echo merchant roads felt speedy beside your stall circuits. Tax arguments milder than naggy grooms snapping over curry jobs botched. Knights mean gear inventories by rushlight, quill-scratching tallies of lost spurs or frayed girths that'll cost your meager wage. Winter bites deepest. Fingers too numb for knot tying, colts coalescing from wet fodder you mix shivering. That monk's psalms loop gentler than your master's curses when you shave his palfrey's fetlock. Joke 3. Squires prove chivalry began at dawn with a clean stall. Dreams replay box and bridal fumbles. Dawn cracks muck, curry hold. Years grind toward knighthood's hollow vigil, chores your true dubbing, where polish outshines prowess and tedium tempers more than steel. You trudge into the town guild hall as the terse bell fades, the air thick with damp thatch, smoke, and the sour tang of unwashed apprentices crowding benches worn glassy by decades of squabbling elders. Your seat as junior counselor awaits, not a throne of power, but a splintery stool where you nod through endless debates about whose tannery follows the stream or which baker skimps on loaf weights. This is medieval governance at its core, rules piled on rules, from curfews on pigs to fines for overhanging eaves, all hashed in smoky sessions where progress stalls faster than a lame ox. Your quill scratches minutes onto vellum scraps, ink blotting as the reeve drones about boundary stones nobody can agree to shift. Town councils managed daily order through bylaws thicker than prayer books, with 14th century London guild records filling vaults with ordinances on everything from all strengths to apprentice beatings. Municipal red tape that choked commerce as often as it curbed chaos. You mediate the first dispute, tanner versus dyer over dye runoff turning hides orange, both waving fists while you measure the brook with a knotted cord that never satisfies. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some guilds enforced smell patrols, officials sniffing streets at dawn to find bakers whose loaves went off, or butchers whose offal piles drew rats bigger than cats. Voices rise, you bang a mallet carved from driftwood, calling for precedents that bury everyone in dustier ledgers. Historians still argue whether these petty councils fostered civic pride or just amplified grudges. Did rules build community? Or did pig wars prove peasants needed sheriffs more than charters? Mornings dissolve into zoning rows. His eaves drip on my wash line! Countered by, your eaves blocked my light since Lammas! You sketch crude maps, quill nib snapping mid-line while arguments loop like bad hymns. Sensory sludge clings candle tallow gutters, plopping wax pools, breath fogs vellum. Neighbors' garlic lunch burps punctuate points. Joke 1. Governance moved slower than frozen molasses, which explains the pig curfews. Remember that squire's stall mucking? Your hall reeks comparably, council flatulence the true chamber music. Afternoons drag into guild audits. Weavers shorting yardage, smiths overcharging nails, all find coppers that vanish into repair pots for the market cross. Pig disputes peak. Yours rooted my garden again! You ordering fences mended from communal funds that never materialize. That taxman's tallies. Yours breed bigger headaches, cross-hatched with illiterate thumb marks. Joke 2. Council invented bureaucracy's fine art, one pig fine at a time. Carlbach's haunt. Feast delays felt swift beside these filibusters, merchant bribes subtler than reeve, palm gracing. Evenings mean bylaw readings by torchlight, eyes watering as you intone curfew clauses verbatim since memories fade under repetition. Fights nearly erupt over stray dog taxes, resolved by straw drawing that cheats half the time. That healer's waiting. For council-inflicted stress boils. Joke 3 towns ruled by pigs. For pigs of pigs. Nights collapse on rush mats, dreams of endless gavels. Dawn tolls hall fills, disputes renew, rules recycle. Governance grinds eternal, rules your rosary. Where zoning trumps zeal and tedium governs truer than kings. You shoulder your pack at the village edge as stars fade into murky dawn. The road ahead a quagmire of ruts deep enough to swallow ankles, stretching toward the next hamlet that's little more than a rumour and a 3-day limp. Travel in medieval times wasn't epic quests across maps. It was you, plodding turnpikes that devolved into swamp tracks, every mile a negotiation with mud, rain, and innkeeps who charged for straw that crawled worse than the road. Your boots, cobbled from stiff leather that blisters heels raw, squish forward, already leaking from yesterday's ford where the river rose faster than your cursors. No adventure here, just the grim calculus of whether you'll reach shelter before nightfall claims another traveller to fever or foot rot. Medieval journeys averaged 20 miles per day on foot, with 13th century pilgrim accounts like those to Canterbury detailing weeks of blisters and bedbugs, where inns were often barns shared with livestock snoring louder than the ostler. You're hobbling past the first milestone now, a weathered stone mossed over, as drizzle turns paths to suction traps that yank off your left shoe mid-stride. The quirky fringe tidbit. Pilgrims wore badge kits, lead ampulla filled with holy well water slung around necks, meant for miracles but mostly sloshing refreshment that leaked down tunics, turning chests to soggy maps of faith. Cart ruts deepen, you skirt a washed-out bridge, balancing on beams slick as ice while pack straps saw into shoulders like dull knives. Historians still argue whether medieval folk travelled from wanderlust or desperation. Did roads connect dreams, or did they just redistribute lice and outlaws? Days blend into foot plod, corns throb under wool, stockings sodden through, staff-thumping rhythm like a death march. Sensory purgatory reigns. Horse, Applemire squelches between toes, wood smoke from distant hearths taunts empty bellies, mosquitoes drone evenings into welts. Joke 1. Travel's thrill died somewhere between Blister 1 and Inn 2. Remember that council pig fights. Yours now battles flies feasting on festering sores from road rash. Nights crash in roadside hovels, doss houses where you share pallets with strangers, coughing fleng globs. Fleas marching parades up your hose while snores shake rafters. Aisles watered bread molds overnight, and dawn brings the bill plus stabling for your ache that needs no hay. That healer's poultices. Blisters claim them first, infections blooming red as guild banners. Joke 2 inns promised rest, delivered wrestling matches with vermin. Callbacks echo. Siege camps offered better sanitation than these open sewers called highways. Merchant wagons at least rolled over your miseries. Week's end nears the goal, a distant shrine or market. But delays pile flooded streams, demand swims that chill marrow. Footpads lurk thickets, forcing detours through briar hells. That squire's muck. Roads serve fresher. Joke 3 adventurers romanticized maps. Reality mapped your blisters. Dreams replay ruts endless. Final miles crawl, pack feather, light from emptied hope, shelters glow a lie till you're inside, peeling sodden layers. Tomorrow restarts, shoulder, squish, limp. Roads own the wary, tedium's true bandit, where distance devours dreams slower than any dagger. You settle onto the uncomfortable bench in the Shire Court, under the great hall's rafters. The air stagnant with old rushes crunching under shifting feet, and the faint must of legal parchments, stacked like accusing towers. Your role as scribe begins at prime, quill poised over vellum as the presiding justice drones through procedural niceties that haven't changed since your grandfather dipped his first nib. Preliminaries about oaths, witnesses, and jurisdiction that drag longer than a winter vigil. This isn't dramatic justice with swift swords. It's you recording every tedious clause of trials that meander like drunk rivers, where guilt hides under mountains of testimony about stolen ewes or breached fences. Your inkwell congeals in the draft, forcing constant stirring while litigants repeat claims verbatim from last sessions. Medieval justice crawled through bureaucracy, with 13th century English ire rolls documenting cases lingering years through appeals, adjournments, and wrets that multiplied faster than rabbits. You scratch the first deposition now, a villain swearing his neighbor's bull fathered calves without permission. Cross, referencing manorial custumals yellowed with age, while the justice interrupts for precedent from 1175. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some courts used 4-deal ledgers, tracking ducking results for suspected witches, complete with weight logs before submersion. Did it float? Guilty. Sink too long? Drowned innocent. Case closed with soggy finality. Pages fill slowly. Your hand cramps mid-sentence as advocates filibuster with irrelevancies like, "But the moon was gibbous that night." Historians still argue whether procedural delays protected the innocent or just enriched scribes charging per parchment. Did red tape ensure fairness, or did it bury truth under its own weight? Mornings dissolve into evidence tallies. You measure disputed boundary ditches with knotted ropes, noting depths while disputants bicker over whose ancestors dug first. Sensory drudge piles on tallow candles sputter wax globs onto your sleeve. Witnesses' garlic breaths fog the page. Gavel thodes vibrate your teeth. Joke 1 courts moved slower than continental drift, which explains the adjourned to Michaelmas verdicts. Remember that road's endless blisters. Your wrist fares worse from quill marathons outlasting verdicts. Afternoons stretch into appeals defendants plead benefit of clergy, requiring literacy tests you administer phonetically while justices nap through recitals. Procedures trump proof. Was the hue and cry raised timely? Delaying judgments till next assizes. That healer's humours, yours imbalance from lawyerly wind. Joke 2 scribes invented shorthand from sheer survival instinct. Callbacks linger council pig rose escalated here into year-long writ wars. Tax excuses shriveled under oath scrutiny. Evenings mean engrossing fair copies by rushlight. Eyes crossing as you rubricate clauses in red ink that bleeds through vellum. Verdicts, rare today, most continued for pleadings. That squire's chores flew faster than these adjournments. Joke 3. Justice was blindfolded, because even she slept through procedures. Nights rack you with hand spasms, dreams of unfinished rolls unraveling. Dawn summons. Bench fills, quill dips, bureaucracy binds. Trials teach tedium's triumph, where process outlives passion and parchment prevails over proof. You hunch over the scriptorium desk as matin's last echoes fade. The sloped oak biting into your forearms while vellum glare stabs eyes already raw from yesterday's unshoal marathon. Your quill, goose, feather trimmed to needle fine, hovers over a fresh folio of Jerome's Vulgate, the page pristine mockery of the headache pulsing behind your temples like a second heartbeat. This isn't scholarly pursuit or holy illumination, it's you, shackled to copying contracts, charters, and endless manorial rolls that blur into one literate purgatory, hand-doomed to trace the same Gothic scripts until death claims your cramped fingers. The air hangs heavy with gallow, tannic ink fumes that sour your stomach before prime, mixing with wax drippings that seal your fate drop by smouldering drop. Scribal work preserved medieval bureaucracy, with monastic scriptoria like those at St. Gall producing over 2,000 charters yearly by the 12th century, each letter a Sisyphean stroke against parchment's unforgiving grain. You prick ruling lines with dividers that slip, gouging margins while your neck vertebrae pop like dry kindling from eternal hunch. The quirky fringe tidbit. Some scribes embedded curses in colophons, tiny hexes like, "May the crab plague the hand of any who alter this," venting spleen on clients who haggled over flourishes or demanded erasures that pumiced flesh raw. Your head throbs by terse, uncorrected errors lurk in yesterday's quires, spelling dominus as dominus, because fatigue turned S into double damnation. Historians still argue whether scribal errors shaped history more than accurate copies. Did transposed dates spark wars, or did meticulous drudgery avert them through sheer volume? Mornings grind into charter engrossing. You rule bifolia with dry lead that smudges under sweat-damp palms, inking clauses about villain heriots and widows' dowers in black, letter minuscules that dance when eyes cross. Sensory torment escalates, quill nibs snap mid-verse. Ink splatters, staining teeth black, pumice rasps fingers to bloody nubs during corrections. Joke 1 scribes invented writer's block by living it. One unshoal at a time. Remember that court's endless rets? You birthed them here, soul crush multiplying per page. Afternoons drag abbreviating marathons. D-N-E. For Dominus, CM. For Sanctam. Shorthand salvation that barely dents the backlog towering like judgment. Headaches bloom cluster type. Vision tunneling to pinpricks after hours of 6-point script. Temples throbbing syncopated to heart. That healer's lancet tempts for vain, tapping relief, but Abbott forbids vain distractions. Joke 2 colophons should curse carpal tunnel's patron, Sate instead. Kalbach's haunt feast lists flew freer than your chained choirs. Road blisters healed faster than nib cuts festering under ink crusts. Evenings mean rubrication. Vermilion clauses painted with brushes shedding bristles into wet pigment, ruining hours' work. Eye-strained peaks, letters multiply into swarms, pages glowing phosphorescent in candle gloom. That monk's psalm loops, yours bind legibly eternal. Joke 3, God dictated in cursive to torture transcribers. Nights collapse clutching warmed stones for hand thaw, dreams replaying cursive coils strangling wrists. Dawn tolls. Desk awaits, vellum pristine, headaches familiar crown. Copying claims your skull, repetitions vise tightening with every stroke, where parchment prevails over pulse and tedium transcribes time itself. You tramp along the baggage train at dawn's murky light, boots churning the same muddy track you've followed for a fortnight, the horizon empty of enemies despite rumors that swirled like campfire gnats last night. Your sergeant's orders echo unchanged, march 10 leagues, dig camp, mount guard rotations that stretch till your eyes crust with sleep, while the army sprawls ahead, a mile-long snake of wagons groaning under grain sacks and spare boots nobody needs. This isn't war's thunder, it's you, pikeman or archer, covering ground that looks identical every day, waiting for battle that never arrives, because the enemy mirrors your caution across valleys too wide for arrows. Your shoulders ache from polyx slung across mail that's already rusting from perpetual damp. Medieval campaigns meant mostly marching, with chronicles like Froissart's detailing 14th century chevauchée as where armies trekked months across France, fighting pitched battles in under 5% of days while foraging and feuding filled the void. You halt for midday, halt now, gnawing hardtack riddled with weevils that crunch between teeth while scouts return with shrugs. They've pulled stakes again, headed north. The quirky fringe tidbit, some captains staged fake retreats with straw dummies on poles, jerking them via ropes to mimic marching columns, fooling enemy spies into thinking reinforcements arrived when it was just farmhands pulling strings. Tents sprout like mushrooms, you hammer stakes into loam that sucks tools deep, blisters reopening from yesterday's peg pounding. Historians still argue whether commanders preferred skirmishes to stand-up fights. Did strategy dictate caution, or did supply lines too fragile force endless maneuvering without commitment? Afternoons dissolve into road, mending you fill ruts with faggots while wagons founder, cursing quartermasters who overestimated fodder. Nights camp in circles of shield walls, fires sputtering wet wood that smokes eyes roar while sentries yawn through watches where the only actions are fox snuffling rations. Sensory slog layers, harness leather molds to sweat sores, cookpots bubble identical peas porridge for weeks, snores blend with distant owl hoots into white noise. Joke 1. Armies marched faster from boredom than fear. Remember that scribes quill cramps, yours not shoulders from pike drill marathons on empty fields. Evenings drag dice games under flickering brands, wagers of bootlesses or belt buckles lost to mates who cheat worse than sutlers. That healer's flux cures. Dysentery claims more than crossbows during these camps. Joke 2 warfare's secret weapon was waiting, attrition by ennui. Kalbach's echo. Siege ditches felt cozy beside open bivouacs lashed by hail. Merchant roads bustled brighter than these ghost tracks evading phantoms. Donpac's tents dripping dew wait, sergeants barking, column form, for another identical league of nothing. Winter campaigns bite deepest, snow cloaks tracks you trampled yesterday, boots freezing mid, step into ice blocks. That's Squire's Currycombs. You'd trade for hoof picks to dig frozen latrines. Joke 3 enemies never found because boredom repelled steel better than plate. Dreams replay phantom trumpets silent at muster. Roll call sounds tramp, dig watch. Warfare wastes you wandering, standing armies standing still, where marches mock momentum and tedium trumps trumpets eternal. You wake to the familiar creak of your four-poster bed frame in the solar, the heavy damask curtains filtering dawn into a murky haze that barely warms the flagstones underfoot. As manor lord, your day begins not with hunts or hawking, but with stewards' reports unrolled across the breakfast trestle, endless tallies of crop rotations, fallow fields, and manure spreads calculated to the quarter acre. This isn't lordly leisure, it's you, pacing the same estate paths your father trod, obsessing over marl ratios for clay soils while villains eye you like a tacksman in velvet. Your hounds stir lazily by the hearth, farting softly as you nod through yields that mirror last harvest's mediocrity, every bushel a reminder that land rebels against ambition. Estate management consumed noble time, with 14th century English manorial accounts like those from Merton College detailing stewards, tracking seed, drills, harvest sheaves, and livestock mortality in ledgers thicker than missiles. You're out inspecting demesne fields by prime now, mud sucking at your best boots as you probe soil with a staff, arguing with the reeve over whether to ridge or broadcast ree.
Last year's lodging cost us a tithe!
The quirky fringe tidbit. Some lords planted witch rose, extra barley strips at field edges, harvested separately for charms against blight, though mostly they just fed the steward's private still. Your boots cake thicker, sensory monotony clings earthworm, tang on wind, damp wool chafing knees, reeves pipe smoke curling like unanswered prayers. Historians still argue whether over management starved innovation. Did lords' obsession with rotation stifle new crops, or did it preserve fertility through rigid repetition? Afternoons drag into granary audits. You climb ladders to probe bends for weevils, tallying bushels by peck while dust chokes sinuses and rats skitter underfoot. Steward disputes every shortage. The mice take their tithe too, sparking quill duels over precedent rolls yellowed brittle. Joke 1 estates ran on manure math, where lords shoveled figures instead of fields. Remember that army's endless marches. Yours loop barnyard circuits, checking milk yields from cows that eye you balefully. Evenings mean account reconciliation by tallow, quill scratching demesne profits against customary dues while your lady embroiders nearby, conversation circling dairy disputes, that healer's poultices. Yours soothe reeve, fight bruises from gesturing gonorrhea. Joke 2 stewards invented passive aggression, perfecting it over crop ledgers. Callbacks haunt, court rets flew freer than your chained yields, road blisters paled beside boot ruined heels from pasture slogs. Winter looms worst, fields frozen judgment, audits doubling as you plan spring marling carted from pits miles distant. Nights rack you with tallies unbalanced, dreams of blighted acres swallowing barns. That scribe's headaches. Yours throb from column crunching marathons. Joke 3 nobles managed estates to death, one bushel at a time. Dawn cracks shutters, steward knocks with fresh rolls. Fields wait inspection, rotations rigid, tedium's true harvest where yields yield nothing new and land locks lords eternal. You rise from your carved settle by the hall's meager fire as cockcrow fades, the chill seeping through fur-lined slippers despite the wall, hangings meant to trap warmth that never lingers past noon. Noble entertainment wasn't the ceaseless revelry of minstrel myths, it was you, rattling dice in horn cups for feather stakes, or watching hounds chase the same lure across fields you've trampled since Michaelmas. Your falcon, proud Tiercel named Shadow, perches hooded on the muse block, demanding jesses checked thrice before you'll even consider the morning's hunt, which usually yields one wary hare after hours of bramble, scratched cursing. The air carries damp wool and mead dregs. Your life's amusements as limited as winter daylight, stretching afternoons into yawning voids where conversation recycles like bad oil. Medieval pastimes filled hours but rarely delighted, with 14th century noble household accounts allotting more parchment to hunting expenses than actual kills, as game grew wary of horns blown daily across the same coverts. You're afield by prime now hornet lips blasting the same mort that spooked deer last se'night, beaters flushing coveys that veer into thorns while shadow mantles crossly on your wrist. The quirky fringe tidbit, some lords staged bear baitings with painted arena dogs, but mostly the beasts slept through taunts, turning spectacles into naps where spectators gambled on which yawn lasted longest. Mud claims your boots, sensory sameness bites, wet leather squeaks reens, bracken rasps chosses, hounds baying blends into white noise by midday. Historians still argue whether limited amusements bred melancholy or contented fatalism. Did nobles chase hares to flee boredom, or did repetition numb desire itself? Evenings dragged to hall games, chessmen carved Yule past, openings memorized after 50 matches where you stalemate predictably. Tables grown under dice games, hazard, gleek, wagers of ribbons or IOUs settled by dawn, laughter thinning to sighs. That healer's routines, yours loop gentler. Mead rounds identical nightly, tales of uncle's tourney triumph now on iteration 40, punchline eliciting polite coughs. Joke 1. Entertainment proved scarcer than virgins at court, hunted harder with less success. Remember that estate's crop tallies. They thrilled more than these hairless chases circling nowhere. Gambling piques peril, cards ill shuffled by servants, knights fleecing each other over gloves while you nurse losses from last week's primero. Storytelling fills gaps, bards pluck rote lays of Roland. Verses worn smooth as river stones. Joke 2. Minstrels rhymed tedium into epics, one recycled couplet per yawn. Kalbach's echo. Siege dice felt fairer than these rigged horns. Road inns bustled livelier than your echoing solar. Falconry fails too. Shadow soaks mid-flight, stooping at shadows before jessing home empty taloned. Hours wasted on preen and pluck marathons. Winter contracts delights cruelest. Fields snowbound. Hunts reduced to ferret, chasing in barns where rats evade longer than deer. That scribe's quill grind. Yours clicks dice emptier. Joke 3. Nobles hunted boredom best, bagging tedium by the herd. Nights blend into mazer toasts circling familiar faces, dreams replaying unlanced boars. Dawn stirs hounds restless. Mewers await, dice rattle, lays recommence. Amusements chain you captive. Repetition's true quarry where hunts harvest nothing fresh and pastimes pale beside plain sleep. You feel the weight of all those days now, don't you? The slow pull of routine wrapping around you like a familiar cloak, heavy but comforting in its sameness. Those fields you walked, the hammers that fell, the pages turned one after another, they stretch behind you like a long, quiet road fading into mist. No more ditches to crouch in, no more tallies to balance, no more marches leading nowhere. Everything settles, softens. Your breath evens out, matching the gentle rise and fall of some distant sea, lapping endlessly at a shore you'll never need to reach. Let the images drift now. The forge glow dims to embers, barely whispering heat. Candle flames in the scriptorium gutter low, shadows pooling like spilled ink, blurring the edges of worry. The road's mud dries to harmless dust, carried off by a breeze that touches your cheek like a forgotten hand. All those voices. The reeves grumble, the hounds bay. The quill's faint scratch, they hush into silence, one by one, folding into the vast, starless night where nothing calls you forward. You're safe here, in this gentle nowhere. No dawn bell to jolt you upright, no ledgers waiting, no fields demanding your step. Just the soft hum of breath, in and out, carrying you deeper. Muscles loosen thread by thread, until you're floating, weightless, on a current smoother than any river you ever forded. Sleep claims its due now, kind and unhurried, washing away the last traces of toil. Sweet dreams await beyond the horizon, peaceful as forgotten meadows swaying under moonlight.